Greetings, fellow Rotarians and guests. My name is Joe Young, and it's my honor to serve as the 2020-2021 President of the Rotary Club of Columbus. Founded in 1915 with our first meeting in February of 1916, our club is one of the oldest and largest within Rotary International. Our membership includes a diverse set of leaders within business, city government, military affairs, health care, education, arts and culture, social services, and ministry, all sharing a common desire to improve our community and have a positive impact on the world around us. The world needs Rotary and the ideals that we represent now more than ever. The onset of the COVID-19 pandemic has dramatically changed the way we live, work, and interact with one another. School-aged children that were already struggling with food insecurity and educational development are falling further behind. Recent acts of violence perpetrated against our African American brothers and sisters have further highlighted the fact that systemic racism continues to plague our nation. Political division and social unrest continue unabated. The world needs our leadership. And while these are extremely difficult challenges to overcome, Rotary is well positioned to be part of the solution. I long for the day when it will be safe for us to meet and fellowship again in person. Until then, please keep wearing your mask, please keep loving each other, and please keep serving others above yourselves. On behalf of my wife Vicki and our daughters Katie and Lynn, I want to thank you for all that you are doing to make our community a better place to live. It's my pleasure to serve alongside you. Now let's get to work. Greetings and welcome to the July 15th meeting of the Rotary Club of Columbus. Whether you're joining us as a member or a guest, we're so glad to have you here with us. I hope that you and your families are continuing to stay healthy and safe, and I hope that having Rotary on your calendar provides some sense of normalcy in what's an uncertain and challenging environment that all of us are facing these days. Our Pledge of Allegiance today is going to be led by Estella and Declan Overton. These are children of Carmen Overton.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Estella and Declan, thank you guys so much. You did a great job, and we're so glad to have you lead us in the pledge. It's our club's tradition to honor a soldier each week within our meeting, and oftentimes that's a soldier that's currently active duty on post at Fort Benning. This week, however, we're excited to be able to honor one of our own. Dick Nurnberg is going to be doing the introduction for us.
President Joe and fellow Rotarians, our military guest today is no stranger to any of us. It's Bob Offer, who recently retired after 18 years as our chapter sergeant at arms, but most of us don't know him as Colonel Retired Bob Offer, and that's why he's our military guest today. He was actually born at Walter Reed Army Medical Center because his dad was in the Army and retired as a colonel. And he went to school in Charleston, South Carolina at the Citadel, along with several other people that we know. After graduating from the Citadel in 1961, he went to Fort Bragg with the 18th Airborne Corps, and then came to Fort Benning in 1963, where he was with the 11th Air Assault Division, which, as we know from We Were Soldiers, later became the 1st Air Cavalry Division. Bob deployed with them to Vietnam on his first tour, and then he did a second tour in Vietnam in 1969. He went back to Fort Sill, and he commanded a battalion. He commanded a brigade in Turkey. He had an assignment in Italy. He went to school in New Zealand to a course. He has been everywhere practically, and he went to the Defense Language Institute, and because of that, Bob speaks passable English, but he's also fluent in Italian and speaks French, German, and Turkish. He has been a Rotarian for over 30 years. In 1991, Bob was introduced as a visiting Rotarian in our club by Carol Rutland, and under the auspices of no good deed goes unpunished, her reward for that was that Bob married her after that, and they have 3 grown children. In addition to being a longtime Rotarian, he has worked as a civilian with Allied Technologies and with Manpower, and he's a very good tennis player and served on the board of directors of Corda here in Columbus. Bob, on behalf of all of our Rotarians and all the members of the club, we thank you for everything you've done, for your military service, for your service as a Rotarian, for your service as our Sergeant of Arms for 18 years, and we wish you and Carol and everybody else the best. Thank you very much.
Bob, thank you so much for your service to our country, to our community, and to our club. We're so glad to have you and Carol in our ranks. We had a bit of a technical snafu with the Pledge of Allegiance video. We are going to try to show that again because you don't want to miss this. So here's the pledge again. This is Estella and Declan Overton.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, for liberty and justice for all.
Great job, guys. Thanks again for leading us in the pledge. It's always a great day in Rotary when we get to have a new member join our club, and it's my pleasure to turn it over to past President Ben Richardson, who's going to be introducing our newest member. Ben?
Good afternoon, fellow Rotarians. David Ranieri is a career prosecutor and currently serves as the Chief Assistant Solicitor General of Muskogee County. He was born and raised in Columbus, Georgia. He attended Columbus State University and received a full ROTC scholarship to Mercer University. He graduated cum laude from Mercer University and was a distinguished military graduate, ranking in the top 20% of Army ROTC graduates nationwide. He then attended and graduated from Walter F. George School of Law, Mercer University, don't hold that against him, with a Juris Doctorate degree. He served in the U.S. Army as captain in the Judge Advocate General's Corps and thereafter served as an Assistant Solicitor General, where we worked very closely together. Matter of fact, David was honored to be selected as Assistant Solicitor General of the Year for the state of Georgia. Senior associate at the law firm of Carlock Copeland, Similar and Stair, and as an Assistant District Attorney here in the Chattahoochee Judicial Circuit. Currently, he's back with the Solicitor General's office as the Chief Assistant Solicitor. He's also a member of the Georgia and Alabama State Bars and a member of the Columbus Bar Association. David is a graduate of Leadership Columbus and Leadership Development Program for the Columbus Consolidated Government and has attended the National District Attorneys Association Career Prosecutors Executive Course. He teaches law enforcement officers at the Columbus Police Department and the Police Academy for the Georgia Public Safety Training Center. He currently serves as Chairman, New Horizons Community Service Board of Directors, Executive Board member of the Leadership Development Program for the Columbus Consolidated Government, trustee of Columbus Lawyers Club Educational Foundation, mentor for beginning lawyers appointed by the Supreme Court of Georgia, and he's a master of the bench at the Columbus Inns of Court. He's also past committee chair of the Boy Scout Troop 1, past chairman of Stewardship Council for St. Anne Church, and currently serves on the Parish Council at St. Anne Church. He's married to the lovely Katrina, and they have 6 children. Fellow Rotarians, please let us welcome David to our club.
Thank you, Judge Richardson, President Young. I'm grateful for this opportunity. I look forward to serving with a great organization, and thank you all very much. I look forward to meeting you, and thank you. Thank you, Joe.
Thank you so much for joining us we're Club 200 out of approximately 35,000 clubs worldwide. We were founded in 1915, and when you join Rotary, you join the largest humanitarian organization in the world with over 1.2 million members worldwide that are committed to improving the human condition. So thank you so much. We look forward to serving with you.
Thank you.
One of the ways that the Rotary International is able to have such an amazing impact on communities around the world is through donations that Rotarians and other individuals make to the Rotary Foundation. We have numerous members within our club that are actively supporting, making contributions to the Rotary Foundation through their quarterly dues. For those of you that are doing that, thank you so much. For those of you that are not, we encourage you to consider doing so. But we want to recognize today 3 of our members that have reached milestones in their giving to the foundation. And I want to introduce Past-president Michael Silverstein to recognize these individuals.
President Joe and fellow Rotarians, good afternoon. It's my pleasure and honor to be able to introduce our newest multiple Paul Harris Fellows today. And for our new members, in order to receive the recognition of becoming a Paul Harris Fellow, you contribute an aggregate amount of $1,000 to the Rotary Foundation. And subsequently, for every additional $1,000 you contribute, you then become a multiple Paul Harris Fellow. It is through these contributions that we are able to provide multiple service projects to our city, to our state, to our country, and globally throughout the world. I now want to congratulate Ron Mullins for becoming Paul Harris Fellow +1, and Lamar Powers and Frank Jordan for becoming Paul Harris Fellows +3. We truly appreciate your generous contributions and your support of the Rotary Foundation. Please join me as we congratulate Ron, Lamar, and Frank. Thank you so much, gentlemen.
Ron, Lamar, and Frank, thank you so much for your ongoing support of the Rotary Foundation and for the generous spirit that represents. We have just a couple announcements that I wanted to bring to your attention today, most notably of which is all of you should have received through an email a 3rd survey where we're trying to determine when we're going to return to in-person meetings. We're currently targeting July the 29th. That date is not set in stone. Your board is going to be meeting on Tuesday of next week to discuss results of the survey and what our next steps need to look like to move toward returning to in-person meetings. We recognize that many of our members are going to be uncomfortable returning to in-person meetings for the foreseeable future, possibly until there's a vaccine for the COVID virus, and that's totally fine. We support those individual decisions, and we're continuing to make our virtual capabilities available for the foreseeable future. For many of our members, they're ready to come back to in-person fellowship. And certainly that is a day that we look forward to, and we want to get back to that date as quickly but as safely as possible. For those of you that have already taken the survey, thank you very much for doing so. For those of you that have not, please take just a couple of minutes this afternoon at the conclusion of the meeting to go ahead and do that for us. The feedback is invaluable as we determine how best to move forward. We're going to close the survey this afternoon, so you still have some time to get it done, and we appreciate your efforts in doing that. We have that's really the biggest announcement. We've had a full agenda today, so let me now bring in our program director for this year, Ben McMahon, who will be introducing today's guests. Thank you, Ben.
Thank you, President Joe. Fellow Rotarians, it's my pleasure to introduce today's program and speaker, Nikki Dutton. Nikki works with the A21 Campaign, a global anti-human trafficking organization that seeks to abolish slavery everywhere, forever. As our club too strives to end human trafficking, we're grateful for Nikki to join us and share how COVID-19 has impacted this humanitarian crisis. While Nikki and her husband, Scott, live in Fort Worth, Texas, they are both natives to Columbus. After working 5 years locally for a nonprofit founded by the Chick-fil-A family, Nikki accepted a position with the A21 Campaign and moved to California with her husband. Nikki's role at A21 has been to collaborate in writing a curriculum to use by children who have been rescued from human trafficking. Nikki is currently pursuing a master's degree in evangelism and leadership through Wheaton College and speaks at various conferences and events nationally throughout the year. And this next quote is probably a controversial one, but Nikki wanted me to say it anyways. She stated, "Columbus will always be home for me and my husband, and I stand by the argument that Clearview Barbecue is the best in town, hands down." Please remember, if you have any questions for Nikki, leave them in the comments below. Fellow Rotarians, Nikki Dutton.
Ben, thank you so much. And I will stand by that argument that Clearview is the best barbecue in town. But like Ben said, my name is Nikki Dutton, and it's just an honor to be with you today. It's truly an honor to speak with a group of people who have the same heart that we do, that we really believe that a world without human trafficking is possible, and that we feel like we can be a part of that solution on a local level, but also at the national and international level. And my experience with A21 the past year has been incredible. I have been able to work on amazing projects. Like Ben mentioned, I had the opportunity to partner with our Director of Global Aftercare on a curriculum that we are using in Cambodia right now, is where we are piloting it, for children who have been rescued out of sex trafficking specifically. And so what that looks like is we want that curriculum just to help these young people know what their rights are, know what their value is, and really be restored to a life of flourishing and independence, even though they have been through one of the most unimaginable things that we could even fathom. And so it has just been a joy. And another cool thing that I've been able to be a part of is just doing more research on what it looks like to be a trauma-informed organization. And basically what that means is, how do we operate in a way that is mindful of the trauma that our survivors have been through, that is mindful of what engaging with that trauma on a day-to-day basis looks like for our frontline workers. So those are a few of the projects that I have had the opportunity to work on. And along the way, I've learned so much more about the human trafficking crisis that is happening in the US. And surely none of us imagined that the humanitarian crisis of human trafficking would also collide with this global pandemic. And there are new and emerging trends and connections as to how those two things are relating with each other at this time that I'm going to share with you today. But first, I wanted to introduce you a little bit more to A21. We are a nonprofit that is based actually in Orange County, California, and we have offices all over the world. We actually started as one site in one country in 2008 and have since grown to have 18 sites in 13 countries around the world today. And we're constantly trying to grow bigger and bigger, just so that that message of really abolishing slavery everywhere forever can really ring true throughout the world. So A21 has a unique solution to breaking the effects and the cycle of human trafficking, and that happens in three ways. The first way is we do this through REACH, our REACH initiatives, and this is just to raise awareness about human trafficking, the realities of it, even the locality of it, that it really is happening right in our own cities and towns and neighborhoods. And as hard as that is to accept, if we can understand that and start to know what some of those characteristics of human trafficking might be, then we can actually step in and be a part of the solution to rescue lives. And our goal is to prevent human trafficking before it starts. So if we can intervene in those critical moments before someone is trafficked, or even before someone is put into a vulnerable situation, that is our hope through our REACH initiatives. And that happens through education, curriculum, prevention programs. And then our biggest event every year is our Global Walk for Freedom, which in 2019 was hosted in over 500 locations around the world. And that's just to raise awareness. The second thing that A21 does in the fight to end human trafficking is we do partner with local and government authorities to rescue survivors out of trafficking situations. And we do this through a variety of programs like hotlines. We also have a child advocacy center that we just founded this year. And then we do identification trainings with frontline workers. Maybe this is in the airline industry or even with local law enforcement, just to help them know what to look for and how to really approach the human trafficking situation in a way that makes sense and really leads to solution. And then the last thing that we do, and I must say this is definitely my favorite thing that we do, is we are about restoring individuals who have unfortunately been affected by human trafficking. And our goal with everyone who comes into A21's care is to restore them to a life of independence. So we want these individuals to know their worth, know their value, to gain critical skills that they can use to make a living for themselves and for their families, and to receive the care that they need, yes, through education, but also through healthcare as well. So we have freedom centers all over the world where we are actively working with survivors to go forward in their life of independence and their healing and their restoration. And that is definitely my favorite thing that we do. And the stories are unreal of the ways that we've been able to really just be a partner in the healing process for a survivor. I like to remind people we are not the heroes. A21 is not the hero. The brave survivors who ask for help or who sit in court against their oppressors, those really are the heroes in this whole situation. And they really are the key to us being able to tear down these systems as best as we can. So a brief intro to human trafficking, if you are not as familiar or just need a little bit of a review on what human trafficking is. By definition, human trafficking is the illegal trade of human beings used for their bodies for labor or for sex trafficking. So it's that commodity factor where a human is traded for a monetary gain. Really, human trafficking is a billions and billions of dollar industry. It is a very lucrative business, and that is what makes it so difficult to deconstruct. And it's very, very far reaching. The forms of trafficking really vary depending on area and situation. There is labor trafficking, there is sex trafficking, there's domestic servitude, and some anti-human trafficking organizations also look at forced and bonded marriages as well. And the sad thing about human trafficking is that it affects a wide variety of individuals. It really makes your stomach sick at some of the cases that happen with young children, but it also turns your stomach to think about some of the elderly who have been stuck in these cycles of human trafficking for decades. And so it really is a far-reaching program. And like I mentioned, there isn't really a delineation between like local, national, global. I think for many years, we thought that this was something that happens, you know, in a foreign country. We think about the movie Taken and that situation. And while yes, that does happen, there are also forms of it that are happening even in our hometown. So it's just very vital and very important for us just to be aware of what the characteristics of human trafficking are. And at the end, I'll let you know that I'm happy to share resources with Joe or with Ben and let them put that into your hands if you're wanting more information. But you can definitely visit A21's website to learn what some of those characteristics are. Today, though, what I want to focus on is this effect of COVID-19 on the human trafficking industry. I think many of us have spent a lot of time in our homes, in our own space, and it feels kind of like the world was just like cut off overnight. We're just here, and this virtual interaction is about as good as it gets for a lot of us. But the effects on human trafficking were instant and unfortunately have been pretty dramatic. And it is still fairly new. So a lot of the information I'm sharing is developing and continuing to emerge as we all try to navigate what this pandemic looks like and what those effects are. But I do want to share a few of them with you today. And my hope is that this maybe sheds light in an area of your own neighborhood or your home or your influence or whatever, even just educationally, that it helps you to understand how this pandemic is affecting those in truly vulnerable situations. So one of the things that has increased during the pandemic, during this COVID-19 pandemic, is we anticipated and have seen so far an increase in the online exploitation of children. Something that's also difficult about children being home from school and not being in their community rhythms as much is that mandated reporting has also decreased. And that is because individuals like teachers or daycare workers or other adults who normally would be mandated to report any signs of neglect, abuse, or anything that is off are not interacting with those children as much because everyone is at home. Now, we have seen some successful cases where even through some training, Zoom calls, teachers are able to pick up on a few things that are odd, but the online exploitation of children has unfortunately increased during this global pandemic time as everyone is turning their attention to technology and unfortunately seeking different things through technology, which is just really, really difficult. And the online crimes that occur against children happen in a few different ways. There is sharing abuse images, there's manipulating children online for abuse, and according to the Freedom Collaborative, there's also sextortion and trafficking. And I know that those are really difficult things to consider. Those are really difficult things to say, but unfortunately that has been something that we have seen has increased during this time. Again, I also shared that there's been a decrease in victim identification. While a lot of the nonprofits and government agencies are continuing to function in some capacity during this time, there has been a decrease in the identification of new victims. And that's just because a lot of the world has shut down at this point, and there is a little bit more of a disconnect between the people who are looking for these individuals and for the people who are unfortunately trafficking them. Another thing is that there has been increased psychological struggles for survivors of human trafficking. So there have been some early reports that different individuals who maybe have emerged out of an abusive or oppressive situation are now starting to have signs of PTSD as they're being locked and confined in their homes. Every country has different mandated obligations, and so some of them are really, really, really feeling that burden of being stuck, of being cut off, and that has been something that we have had reported in some of our survivors in our care, that this lockdown has just been a bit triggering psychologically. Now, the big thing that I wanted to share, and kind of if you're hearing just a lot of data, a lot of information, and you're like, I don't know, where to land with all of this, the biggest thing that I wanted to underline is that human trafficking occurs because there is a vulnerability. Human trafficking occurs because there is a vulnerable situation or a vulnerable person who unfortunately is taken advantage of by someone who is looking to monetize that person's being, that person's existence, that person's body. And with the pandemic, a lot of us maybe have suffered different economic effects of that. But for some of our individuals who are in lower socioeconomic status, they have definitely felt the effects of this even more. The unemployment rate, of course, has skyrocketed globally. And that leads to an increase in opportunities for false job offers. So that would really feed into that labor trafficking, where maybe now someone who is an oppressor is making the most out of this opportunity, and they are trying to maybe persuade someone to take a job offer that isn't legitimate or that leads to a very dangerous situation. So we have seen that. We have also seen that poverty and lack of resources is also contributing to the health care crisis, just receiving the needs, the medical attention that they need. And this has just been a big part of this pandemic, that the vulnerability that was already pre-existing has now just been underscored and amplified, and has just been really, really, really underlined. And so for anyone in our communities, you can think of someone who might be vulnerable economically, who might be vulnerable socially, who may not have that same social capital that some of us may have to reach out when they need help or assistance. That has been a big thing for this pandemic time. And so I do want to share a few things that have been hopeful during this. I know that data is can be hard to stomach, and it is. I mean, the reality of human trafficking is very grotesque. It's ugly, And it's been disheartening at times to see some of the judicial cases that we had, that we were attempting to prosecute oppressors in the human trafficking industry. We have seen that some of those cases have been put on hold, and that is hard. That is really hard. There's just no way around it. And while court systems and law enforcement and non-government agencies are doing their best, it has been a difficult time. And our creativity in reaching human trafficking survivors is unfortunately matched by the creativity of the oppressors, who once there's a change in, the way that they function, the way that they run, they unfortunately are monopolizing on other opportunities. But there have been some really, really hopeful things that we have seen during the last few months that we are hoping will continue to increase, and that 2020 will be a pivotal year in the fight against human trafficking. And one of those things is that even among this pandemic, since the beginning of 2020, we have still, just in A21, have seen 95 victims identified. We have also received 51 new survivors into our care. So these are the people who are going through our restore process, our restore programs. We have had over 1,300 calls to we've had over 1,300 frontline professionals who have been trained. That is the beauty of Zoom. That is the beauty of technology, that our training for frontline professionals does not have to stop. It looks very different, but even in this call, we're having the opportunity to train you on just training your mind to be aware of these things. And then through some of our prevention programs, we're able to equip local law enforcement even more in that prevention. And we have seen and we have received over 2,000 calls to our hotlines to report suspected trafficking, which those are huge wins. We have a saying in the office that we really do this for the one. So even if the numbers across all those boards were one victim identified, one new survivor in our care, one hotline call placed, we really still feel like all the effort is worth it. And another organization called Free the Slaves shared a fun story that I also wanted to encourage you with, just knowing that you can still make a difference during this time. That they had survivors who have been brought out of human trafficking, who have been redeemed, and who have found new skills. They actually were able to serve as the front line of COVID response. And what that means is they were able to do that in a safe way. But this team of 30 survivors in Haiti were able to make 4,000 masks and 2,400 hygiene kits that they could ship all over the world. And that is just something that has been super encouraging to see, that some of those skills, some of those, that ground that was taken before this pandemic hit has actually allowed for some survivors to be more versatile during this time and to be able to find a way to use their skills to not only provide for themselves and for their families, but also to make a difference in the global pandemic and to feel like they get to be a part of a solution, which has been really, really cool. But the thing that you can do, kind of, if you're asking yourself, I live in Columbus, Georgia, what on earth can I do about this? I would say the first thing is just to allow yourself to be educated about what's going on. I know that it's so hard to hear these stories, to see these facts and these figures, but if you can really just allow yourself to understand the current situation for human trafficking, that's a great, great place to start. Knowledge is powerful, and education is a privilege, and it's very, very powerful. And if you would allow yourself to be educated about these things, then you'll know how to make a difference in your community of influence, in your circle of influence. And the other thing is that at the center of human trafficking is the financial aspect. Money is what is running the human trafficking industry. And unfortunately, during this global pandemic, there has been a decrease and a decline in the giving to NGOs for human trafficking, in the fight against human trafficking. So I was talking with the team beforehand. A21 is awesome, and we would be happy to share all of our resources with you. But really, I mean, it's an amazing, amazing united front of organizations who are trying to make a difference in this fight against human trafficking. So whatever organization you already support, whatever organization, I know the Rotary Club has done amazing, amazing work in the fight to end human slavery. And so whatever that looks like for you to continue to be involved, I would definitely encourage that, and just encourage you just to have conversations, especially when it comes to the child exploitation that is very, very, very common in the United States online. So just be aware, just be educated, and just choose to not look away. There was one survivor that I listened to on a podcast that shared that it just gives them hope for the individuals who are stuck in trafficking situations currently. It gives them hope to know that someone is looking for them, that someone cares, that someone hasn't forgotten them. And I know that we have so many things on our minds and so many things personally that we're trying to work through, but I would just implore you and encourage you just to care and just to continue to look, continue to see, continue to learn. And I really think that that's the biggest way that in this strange season, we can continue to partner together to really bring this thing to an end. So, like I said, I'd be happy to share any resources that I have found that have been helpful. There's so much out there, and I can make sure that the team gets that to you, whatever that looks like.
All right. Hey, Nikki, can you hear me okay?
Yep, I can hear you.
All right, good. Well, thank you for that meaningful program, for spending time with us today. As you know and mentioned, Rotary, and specifically the Rotary Club of Columbus, has become involved in this effort in recent years. And we appreciate the work that you do and the resources you provide to combat this. I have a couple questions that have come from the group here. Is there formal cooperation between A21 and law enforcement?
Mm-hmm. Yes. That's actually our approach, is to really partner with law enforcement and just with government to really start the fight there. There are some organizations who, like IJM is a great example, who take that even further, and they are on the ground, like boots on the ground with the law enforcement, addressing certain situations of human trafficking. Something that we've done is just really partner with governments around the world and try to train their local law enforcement and have trainings for their government so that they can understand what this looks like in their area. So yes, law enforcement has been extremely, extremely helpful. And honestly, in the fight against human trafficking, they are key, and they're the ones who are frontline for sure.
Wonderful. Thank you. Another question: what is the average annual cost to support the individual per year on their journey back to a productive life?
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't actually know the exact dollar amount of what it would cost to put a survivor through 1 year of care, but I could definitely share that information with you. I know that on our website, there are a few different tiers for monthly giving that kind of outline what that would add up to over a year. So even if it's a small amount, that helps with the education and the curriculums, and then larger amounts, what that could lead to. So that would be a great resource to check out. I'm not sure about that exact dollar amount.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Another question here. Sorry, it came in on my phone. Let me look.
That's okay.
This is a kind of what we as individuals can do. If we see, if a Rotarian actually sees or becomes aware of a potential human trafficking victim,
Mm-hmm.
what exactly should we do? How should it be addressed, and what specifically would you tell a Rotarian to do?
Definitely. That's a great question. I would definitely say call your local law enforcement for sure. I know that there are a few organizations, even in the Columbus area, who have really done a lot to try to further just the awareness in the Columbus area about human trafficking, which I think is huge. But also, I would say to call the national hotline for human trafficking. I don't have that number on me right now, but if you just Google that, something that I encourage people to do is just to keep that number in your phone. If I were to pull my phone up right now, I have that as a contact, so that if I see something, even if I'm not sure, sometimes it's just that gut feeling that something is just off, it's worth reporting. And there are other hotlines that would be helpful to have in your contacts as well. For instance, if you were to become aware about a situation involving a child that may be in an abusive or neglectful situation. There are local numbers, there are national numbers, but just contacting any of those hotlines would be a really great place to start. And I would just encourage people, if you aren't sure, if you are worried, you would rather say something and it be investigated and things totally check out than to not say something for fear of being wrong. I think that's something that sometimes stops us from taking that first step, is we don't want to be wrong. But I think that your gut is often on. So I would say definitely call those hotline numbers and keep them in your phone so that you have them.
What type of relationship or formal partnership might exist between A21 and the White House or the Department of State?
Yeah, that's a great question. Actually, I wish that I had one of our team members on this call. Her name's Michelle Perazzo, and before coming into A21, she actually served in the White House under a couple of the various presidents, and she has been hugely helpful in those partnerships and just helping us think even bigger, large scale about the U.S. government and how we can partner with them in strategic ways. And there are also local governments that have been really helpful. I know we mentioned at the beginning of the call that we just relocated our office to Texas, and that's because the governor and the Texas government have actually done a great job of just advocating for the progress in human trafficking. So I think anytime you as an individual, especially if your circle of influence includes people who are a part of your state government or who are a part of the national government, just having conversations, asking questions, and seeing what has happened. But yeah, there are some really, really cool projects that A21 has been able to partner with at the national level with the White House, which has been really encouraging for us.
Wonderful. There was recently a claim that the online retailer Wayfair was a front for human trafficking, and that claim was found to be false. Are accusations like that helpful or harmful to the frontline work? It's certainly the point Carmen made, the Rotarian asking the question, pointed out that it certainly raised awareness about human trafficking.
Right. I had so many friends who were forwarding me all of the information, and they were like, okay, you're our in-house human trafficking person. Like, is this real? And in the moment I was like, I don't know. There were some things that didn't quite line up with the initial information that I was receiving that I thought was a little bit off. But one thing that I did tell each of those individuals who reached out to me is it is helpful. It's helpful that people are thinking about human trafficking. It's hard because you don't want to monopolize on a situation like that, because you don't want there to be false reporting at all. That can be very detrimental. But it was just helpful for people who initially hadn't really reached out a lot about human trafficking, that started to ask questions and started to wonder, like, could Wayfair be involved? Well, if it's not Wayfair, it would be helpful to ask questions of other brands that you support. It would be helpful to ask questions of other industries that you're a part of, because if it's not Wayfair, there are definitely lots of avenues where this is happening, and it is real. And even if we don't know about it yet, it is definitely a reality.
Absolutely. Well, all right. Thank you so much, Nikki. We're a couple minutes away from 1 o'clock. I do want to point out that Julie Bond mentioned, and Meredith King just mentioned, that we actually keep the hotline number on the back of the Rotobit every week. So for our Rotarians listening, know that number is there in response to that question about what could you do if you become aware of a human trafficking situation. Nikki, thank you so much for your time. I hope people will visit. I think it's a21.org.
Yep, a21.org. That's a great place to start.
Great. Okay. Well, Joe, President Joe, I'll turn it back over to you. And Nikki, thank you again.
Thank you.